Headlines confirm all our worst fears about Arctic warming. Much faster than previously expected. Signs of positive feedbacks kicking in the Arctic. And I had the idea for this when I finally got round to listening to Nature Bat's last interview with meteorologist Nick Humphrey. Largely, I've stopped listening to every interview on climate change that comes my way unless it's got something new. But this was excellent and certainly did have some new material. And in it, he expressed some of my worst fears. And on spec, within 24 hours, we have seen headlines that confirm every bit of what he was saying. And need I say it, nothing would contradict it. Unless you include one video from someone who thinks there's a 50% chance of an ice age. Anyway, so this is what I put up last night. I've reposted it on this article. So a major warm spell has caused nearly half of the Greenland ice sheet to start melting, something that's highly unusual for this time of year. Unusual only if you've been around in the Neolithic period or whenever it was this warm before. While the spike may pass, the gears could already be in motion for a record-setting melt on the ice sheet's western flank. Now that's quite an admission. And it's been scorching by Greenland standards for the past few days, with temperatures rising 10 to 20 degrees Celsius above normal across the island. And this, Nick Humphrey said this almost made him have a stroke when he saw this. So you can see the average ice melt extent for 1981 to 2010, the mean figures. And then this here is in 2019. So that tells us a picture, I think, of exponential change and big, big trouble. So let's just go to the interview with Nick Humphrey. In a wide-ranging interview with Guy McPherson and Kevin Hester, Nicholas Humphrey expressed the opinion that we crossed one trigger point in the 1980s with accelerated ocean warming, drought in the Amazon, and so on. He expressed the thought that we crossed another trigger point in the mid-2010s, which brought an acceleration in everything and the unleashing of a multitude of positive feedbacks. Being the honest player that he is, he thinks the future is short and does not see humans as being able to survive much longer on the planet. Just how long, he does not know, I'd say along with the rest of us. People have been living longer because of technological advances and I would say cheap energy. We would lose that with civilizational collapse brought about by abrupt climate change, and a lot of people are going to die quite quickly. I've extracted two segments from the hour-long interview that accentuate two aspects of abrupt climate change. I really recommend that you go and listen to the entire interview. So the first of these has to do with the melting of land-based permafrost. Landslides and erosion have exposed ice to extremely rapid melting that no one could have foreseen. So I'll just play this segment.
Everyone's concerned, and rightfully so, about the subsea permafrost in East Siberia and a sea starting to have greater releases of methane. Obviously, Shikova and others have done a lot of research into those areas. But I was taken aback the past couple of years by the deterioration in the permafrost over land. Even I, as recently as last year, would have not have thought that it would be much of an issue. But you are now seeing greater and greater more and more research the past few years suggesting that the land is sort of, if you will, if you think of the Earth as a living organism, which people suggest that it is, it's figuring out ways to destroy its own processes that stop it from heating up faster. And one of those things that it's doing is destroying the permafrost over land faster by causing tons of landslides. And those landslides expose ice that otherwise wouldn't have melted probably for many decades, but now it can melt within a matter of weeks to months. It just sits there exposed because a landslide knocks it over and exposes the ice, and then more slides over. That's a nonlinearity.
There's similarities with coastal erosion. I know exactly what you mean. Yeah. As a sailor, I've had a lot to do with coastal erosion. But when I see what's happening up in the Arctic and the permafrost slumps, it has real parallels. And what you're saying is right. The minute you have those slumps, you let the air and the sunshine deep into the permafrost. So of course, that's a self-reinforcing feedback loop.
Yes. Yes, I mean it catastrophically destroys the land permafrost, inch by inch, foot by foot, square mile by square mile. And I mean the dramatic rise in them again since the 1980s has been it's almost there is no, to me, some of these feedback loops, there is no adjective to describe how catastrophic they are. But I think too, a lot of these environmentalists who want to save the world, it's so big that they can't fathom even thinking about it. And it is big, because these are processes that should be taking hundreds to thousands of years, and it's beyond just the, like sea ice and other things that you expect to go relatively quickly, but ice locked in the ground, you do not expect to be destroyed in a matter of years, but that's what's happening, and you don't expect, entire forests and biomes to be burned, die, and be wiped out in a matter of years. That's what's happening around the world, not even including what humans are doing and directly destroying those forests through cutting down and flattening the forest for agriculture or for resources. It's just so big that a lot of people are unable to wrap their brains around it, because when you do, then you realize that it's not in human control any longer.
So there we are. Now, I've done a second segment in which he talks about the floods in the US Midwest, and he says that land is becoming permanently unfarmable and people are leaving the land in a way that may become reminiscent of the Dust Bowl of the 1930s, although it's very difficult to see where people might go in a world that has 3 times the population. So let's just listen to this.
So to me, civilization doesn't really seem to have much left in the tank to deal with these things, because, I can't see a world, when I see a world that's dealing with 20 times more flood events than in 1950 and looking at 30 to 40 times more in a decade and a half. That number is kind of still an abstraction. It's still kind of abstract. But when I see the devastation and the damage to crops that are already occurring right now, with what's happening right now compared to how things were 60, 70 years ago, you have to think, well, how are you going to adapt to that in a year, 5 years, 10 years? I mean, there's cropland here in Nebraska that will never be cropped again because there's sand covering the landscape, and the farmers just had to surrender the land basically back to nature because the river literally rose and just dumped a bunch of sand. How are you going to build your bridges fast enough? How are you going to, I mean, like as Kevin stated with that story, there's still ridiculous amounts of damage left in Houston. How's Houston going to repair that and do so to the extent that it can survive more and more extremes that are going to be insanely worse in 5 years or in 10 years and beyond. If they're, obviously, if there's anyone around to care, yeah, go ahead.
I think that leads to something that I wanted to get Guy to chip in on this discussion. So much of that land has been underwater now for a very long time. One of the articles I read said that a lot of the organisms in the subsoil that rely on oxygen to breathe will be dead when these floodwaters wash away. Not only will they be dead, but the wells and the aquifers and the rivers will all be polluted by the pollutants from the flooding. What's your take on how the land will be left afterwards, Guy?
Well, it's already looking really, really bad in ways that people, I don't think, could have expected. I mean, most people who have been studying climate science knew that we would have an increased amount of rainfall because a warm planet is a wet planet. But the short-term impacts have been so characteristic of a runaway situation that I don't think very many people would have foreseen what's happening. So already we were losing the topsoil in the Great Plains at an astonishing rate, and this just accelerates the process. Already we are seeing contaminants being spread all over the planet as a result of rainfall events, and this just exacerbates that as well. So it certainly doesn't look good. It looks like we're spreading the pollution, spreading the contamination all over the planet even quicker than we possibly could have imagined even a few years ago.
The dead zone is that will likely develop this summer and fall in the Gulf of Mexico will probably be the worst on record based on because of all the flooding and nitrogen rich soils that are going into the Gulf of Mexico. That's what I'm hearing, a lot of that. So there's going to be a lot of death in the Gulf as well.
Right, absolutely. Now,
So, anyway, if that hasn't shocked the pants off you and stopped you in your track, I've just got a few more headlines here, which I'm not going to present them. I'm just going to show them. They're in my blog, and also I'll put them in the description box below. So, first of all, half of Greenland's surface started melting this week, which is not normal. Well, I suppose not normal is a change from faster than expected. And CNN had a similar headline when they described this process as quote unquote highly unusual. Highly unusual, yeah. I wonder if they had journalists around in the Neolithic period. And then this one, Arctic permafrost is going through a rapid meltdown 70 years early. Notice the 70 years early bit. Some of us might say, we told you so. That's what comes when you just look at the IPCC projections, and which are linear, whereas the actual process is much more rapid than that. So I won't go through that. An article there, and from The Guardian, climate crisis, Alaska is melting and it's likely to accelerate global heating. Notice they're using the word global heating, not global warming. The state has just had its warmest spring on record, causing permafrost to thaw and dramatically reshaping some areas. And then from The Independent, climate change, Arctic permafrost now melting at levels not expected until 2090. Yeah, exponential change, that's the word I was looking for. Yes, and many feedbacks, which someone who I know quite well has been talking about for many years now, and has been, of course, rubbished for his efforts. And then finally from Siberian Times, alarming wildfires rage near the giant mouth of hell gash in the tundra, a wonder of Siberia. Destruction of trees by flames Gucci. Butterguy depression rapidly enlarge while remote local settlements are also threatened. So there goes your erosion and landslides leading to further melting. And who knows, maybe these fires are being fueled by methane releases. We wouldn't know, would we? So anyway, here I'll just go through some of these pictures. Here goes some footage. So anyway, let's just see if I can get out of here. Apologize for this. So that's enough from me. This is Seymour Rocks reporting from down under.